What happens back? America's country music queen comes face-to-face with late-night television's Orient boy, and a simple account turns into the most explosive television moment of the year. Tonight, we're diving abysmal into the shocking battle that had millions of admirers alert to their screens and left the absolute ball industry buzzing. Before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop an animated version beneath Kojimi. What you think actually acquired this heated exchange? Assurance me, you're not activity talent to absence a distinct shot of what went down. The Tonight appearance starring Jimmy Fallon was declared to be aloof and other routine promotional appearance. Reba McEntire, the acknowledged queen of country music, was there to allocution about their latest album, her accessible tour dates, and maybe allotment a few action with America's admired backward night host. The audience was arranged with fans. The cameras were rolling, and everything seemed altogether normal as Jimmy introduced his bedfellow with his trademark enthusiasm. Ladies and gentlemen, please acceptable the incredible, the legendary Reba McEntire. Jimmy's voice boomed beyond flat 6B as the familiar theme music played and Reba absolved out waving. To the auspicious crowd, she looked stunning in a abounding bittersweet dress, her signature red beard altogether styled. Every inch the acclimatized aerialist who had baffled both country music and Broadway stages. Reba, acceptable back to the show. Jimmy stood up from abaft his desk, arms outstretched for the accepted hug. You look actually fantastic. How are you feeling? I'm accomplishing wonderful, Jimmy. Thank you so abundant for accepting me back, Reba replied, her acclaimed smile lighting up the date as she acclimatized into Thega's chair. It's consistently such a pleasure to be here. Well, we are captivated to have you. I accept to say your new album is incredible. I've been alert to it nonstop. The vocals, the storytelling, everything about it is aloof, authentic magic. Jimmy best up archetype of the anthology from his desk. Captivation it up for the cameras. Tell us about the afflatus behind this accumulating of songs. Reba leaned forward slightly, her eyes brightening as she began to speak. Well, you know, Jimmy, this anthology is actually about authentic storytelling. It's about real experiences, absolute emotions, and connecting with bodies through honest music. In today's world, I anticipate we've lost some of that authenticity, especially in the entertainment industry. Absolutely. I couldn't exceed more. Jimmy nodded enthusiastically. And speaking of authenticity, I accept to ask about something that's been all over social media lately. There's been some talk about country music artists and their political angle, and how that affects their music and their fan base. What are your thoughts on that? The question seemed innocent enough, but something shifted in Reba's expression. Her smile becoming hardly added aloof, and she took a moment before responding. Jimmy, I've consistently believed that music should bring bodies together, not bisect them. My job is to entertain. To acquaint stories that bell with bodies behindhand off their claimed behavior or political affiliations. Right? Absolutely, Jimmy said. But again, he affiliated bottomward what would prove to be an alarming path. But don't you anticipate artists to accept a responsibility alleged out on important issues? I mean, you accept such a massive platform, such influence. Shouldn't you use that to achieve a difference? Reba's posture straightened slightly, and her voice took on an added abstinent tone. Jimmy, I've been in this business for over 40 years. I've abstrused that back you startling bodies how to anticipate or how to vote. You're not apropos their intelligence or they're appropriate to make their own decisions. My admirers are smart people who don't charge me to acquaint them what to believe. But absolutely there are some issues that are aloof, appropriate, and wrong. Atramentus and white, Jimmy pressed. His accidental address appearance was becoming an added secular band of questioning. Climate change, social justice, equality. These aren't real political issues. They're animal issues, don't you think? The admirers was starting to faculty the restriction building. Reba's acclaimed amour was actuality. Reba said be article cooler. Added guarded. Jimmy, with respect, I anticipate you're oversimplifying some actual complex issues. Activity isn't as atramentus and white as Hollywood brand to pretend it is. There are acceptable bodies on all abandon of these debates, and they deserve to accept their voices heard and their perspectives respected. Well, I mean, sure. But when we're talking about basal animal rights, Jimmy continued, acutely absent to storm clouds gathering. Don't you think there's a moral obligation to stand up for what's right? Your fans look up to you. They assurance you. And that's absolutely why I'm accurate about what I say. Reba replied, her voice becoming added firm. Because I respect them abundant not to corruption that assurance. By pushing my claim calendar on them, they come to my concerts to escape from all babble and analysis for a few hours. To feel affiliated to article beautiful and meaningful. That's what music is supposed to do. Jimmy leaned back in his scare, and for a moment, it seemed like he ability changed direction. But again him of the animate version that would burn theft for a storm. I aloof acquisition inner 18th edition with your Belvedere Chuzesto breach aloof on issues. That affects Amani people. Some abilities say that's a privilege that not anybody can afford. The words afraid in the air like a challenge. And the admirers seem ta collectively authority its breath. Reba says flash with article that any woman wow knew her would admit as a warning sign. Her grandmother's steel backbone. The aforementioned backbone that had carried her through decades in the mala-dominated music industry. Was beginning to show. Jimmy, she said slowly, her articulation baleful calm, I need you to stop appropriate there. I'm sorry. I didn't understand, Jimmy replied. But Hismal was starting to attending forced. I'm just alarming questions that I anticipate our audience is analytical about. No, you're not alarming questions, Reba said, her famous accord alpha to crack. You're authoritative accusations. You register that because I don't broadcast my every political opinion. I'm somehow declining my admirers or shirking some responsibility. And frankly, I find that not abandoned presumptuous, but incredibly insulting. The studio audience was asleep bashful now. This was not the animated badinage they had come to see. This was article else entirely. Article raw and uncomfortable and completely imprinted for both of these beloved entertainers. Reba, I anticipate you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Jimmy tried to backtrack, but the accident was already done. I accept annihilation, but respect for you and your career. I'm aloof saying that in times like these, blackout can sometimes be interpreted as what? Reba cut him off, her articulation sent forth aboriginal time. As cowardice, as complicity, Jimmy, let me acquaint you something about silence. Some messalence is wisdom. Sometimes blackout is respect for added people's appropriate to think for themselves. And some messalence is a live aback to accumulate your mouth shut. Instead of lecturing people you don't like apperceive about capacity you clearly don't understand. The restriction in Studio 6B was now blubbery abundant to cut with a knife. Jimmy's acclaimed quick wit seemed to accept abandon him completelias. He struggled to achieve ascendancy off what was rapidly acceptable a public relations daydream. For both of them. But Reba wasn't finished. You appetite to talk about privilege, Jimmy? Reba's voice was accepting strength. Now, the kind of ability that had allowable stage from the Grand Ole Opry to Broadway. Let me acquaint you about privilege. Privilege is sitting abaft that board in your $1 million studio in your designer suits, amidst by writers and producers who acquaint you absolutely what to say and how to say it. And again having the adventurousness to address a woman who has worked her appendage offer for decades about moral responsibility. Jimmy's face was starting to a like red dot. The admirers could faculty that this was spiraling, absolutely out of control, but they were riveted, clumsy to attending away from this blow amid two entertainment titans. Reba, I think your demography this way to personally. I'm not advancing you. I'm aloof Urias what? Reba interrupted, her Oklahoma emphasis acceptable added pronounced as her acrimony grew. You're aloof doing your job. You're aloof allurement the tough questions. Jimmy, let me ask you something. Aback was the aftermost time you had a absolute chat with a addition who disagrees with you politically. A back waste after most time you sat bottomward with a farmer in Iowa or a branch artisan in Michigan. Or a distinct mother in Alabama and actually accept what they accept to say instead of coging them. What they should think. I allocution to bodies from all walks of life, Jimmy protested weakly. But even he seemed to apprehend how hollow that sounded. My appearance represents every. We acceptable all viewpoints. Reba let out a beam that had no humor in it whatsoever. Your appearance welcomes all viewpoints, Jimmy. Your appearance is a liberal answer alcove masquerading as mainstream entertainment. You and your writers sit about authoritative jokes about both the country. And again you act surprised to back those bodies feel alienated and burst from the entertainment industry. You appetite to know there's such analysis in this country. Attending in the mirror. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of this aberrant meltdown. Jimmy's producers were probably scrambling in the ascendancy room. But there was no way to stop this train wreck now. It was a live television at its most raw and unpredictable. That's completely unfair, Jimmy advanced back. His famous nice guy persona assuredly cracking under the pressure. We achieve fun of everyone equally. We're comedians. That's what we do. And bluntly I think your actuality a little aggressive sensitive air. The chat hyper's acute was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Reba says blazed with a acerbity that fabricated it clear. Jimmy had aloof fabricated the worst mistake of his television career. Hypersensitive, she repeated, her voice dropping to alarming whisper. Did you aloof alarm me aggressive acute for standing out for my admirers and my values? I didn't beggarly it like that, Jimmy stammered. But it was too late. I just think maybe you're overreacting to what was meant to be an affable conversation about important issues. Freeing like conversion, Reba stood up from her chair. Her abounding acme authoritative, her unimposing figure, alike abutting to Jimmy's disc. Jimmy. There was annihilation friendly about what you aloof did. You arrived me on your appearance beneath the pretense of promoting my music. And again you ambush me with the political interrogation advised to achieve me look bad. If I don't accord you the answers you want to hear. Nobody ambushed you, Jimmy said. His articulation assent about hers. These are accepted questions that orphans deserve answers to. If you can't handle a few boxy questions, maybe you shouldn't be accomplishing interviews. The audience gasped audibly at that comment. Jimmy had aloof beyond a band that no interviewers should anytime cantankerous with August. Abnormally not one of Reba McEntire's ability and experience. Reba didn't backfire the way everyone expected. Instead, she went confidential. Her announcement acceptable ice cold. If I can't handle boxy questions, she repeated slowly. Her articulation now carrying the bounding weight of her decades in the entertainment industry. Jimmy, I've been handling boxy questions back before you were old abundant to breach up late now to watch television. I've been grilled by reporters about everything from my ailment to my business to my parenting choices. I've faced down music industry admiral who told me I was too old, too independent. I've performed through claimed tragedies that would accept burst bottom people. So don't you cartel advance that I can't handle boxy questions. Again answer them, Jimmy challenged. Allegedly realizing he was digging his own grave deeper with every word. If you're so tough, if you're so experienced, then stop deflecting and accord your admirers some straight answers. About area you stand in the issues that matter. The issues that amount to who? Reba demanded. Toyo, to your writers, to the bodies in your Manhattan balloon who anticipate they know what's best for anybody else. Jimmy, my admirers' affliction about their families, their jobs, their communities. They affliction about music that speaks to their hearts and their experiences. They didn't charge me to validate their political behavior or acquaint them how to vote, because they're able adults can anticipate for themselves. But surely you accept opinions, Jimmy apprenticed on. Apparently clumsy to admit that Hewis in action he could not win. Surely you affliction about the approaching of the country, about the planet, about social justice. How can you aloof angle on thesis lines and pretend none of it matters? I never said none of it matters, Reba replied. Her patience definitely extensive its breaking point. What I said is that it's not my job to be your political puppet. It's not my job to parrot whatever talking points are accepted in Hollywood this week. My job is to achieve music that moves people, that helps them feel beneath abandoned in this world. And if you can't accept the value in that, again you accept no business interviewing artist. Jimmy was clear lilasine ascendancy of the situation, but instead of a betment bottomward gracefully. Headable bottomward on his mistakes. I think your actuality advisedly bird-brained here, Reba. We both apperceive that art has always been political. Music has consistently been about added than aloof entertainment. Look at the folk singers of the 60s, attending apparatus songs. Attending at what Reba cut him off with devastating precision. Attending at artists who agreed with your political worldview. Jimmy, you don't get to judge what art should be or what music should accomplish. You didn't get to address me about the history and purpose of country music. Agonray you've apparently never accustomed assicant anticipation to unless it served your purposes. The flat was so quiet yo cold apprehend a pin drop. Alike the band members who usually provided musical punctuation to the show's awkward moment seemed arctic in place. This was beyond awkward now. This was claimed, and it was accepting uglier by the minute. A hobby annihilation, but account for counter music, Jimmy said defensively. But his don't appropriate otherwise. I've had plenty of country artists on this show. Respect. Reba laughed bitterly. Jimmy, you aloof spent the aftermost 10 minutes aggravating. To abashment me for not buying political abundant for your taste. You've implied that I'm declining my fans, that I'm privileged, that I'm hypersensitive, and that I can't handle tough questions. If that's your abstraction of respect, I'd abhorrence to see what disrespect looks like. Jimmy accomplished he was cornered. But instead of answer or trying to broadcast the situation, he made on final baleful mistake. Look, Reba, I think your demography this way too personally. Maybe we should aloof agree to disagree and move on to talking about your bout dates. The arrogant tone in his articulation was the aftermost straw. Reba looked at him with a mixture of disgust and disappointment that was aching towage. Demography it to personally, she repeated, afraid her arch slowly. Jimmy, you aloof spent 15 minutes attacking my character, my integrity, and my accord with my admirers on national television. How absolutely should be demography it? Jimmy seemed to realize had pushed too far. But his attempt at accident ascendancy abandoned fabricated things worse. Reba, I'm apologetic if you feel like I was advancing you. That wasn't my intention at all. I was aloof aggravating to have elusive chat about important topics. Maybe we got a little heated. But that's what acceptable television is about, right? Absolute conversations, real emotions. The arrogant emphasis in his articulation was unmistakable. And Reba's expression, confused from acrimony to sympathy and abundant, added dangerous, complete and absolute contempt. Good television, she repeated, her articulation almost a lofty whisper, but accustomed beyond the silent studio like a thunderclap. You think this is acceptable television, Jimmy? You think ambushing your guest and then dismissing their accepted apropos as being claimed as acceptable television? I didn't ambuscade anyone, Jimmy protested, but his articulation lacked conviction. This is show interviews work. We ask questions. We accept discussions. If you don't want to appoint with the topics, that's your choice. But don't accusation me for accomplishing my job. That was the moment Reba McEntire had assuredly heard enough. She stood up from her armchair with adroitness and dignity that somehow fabricated her acerbity alike more impressive. Your job, she said, her voice a scent for the aboriginal time, to match abounding ability of her date presence. Your job is to absorb people, Jimmy. Your job is to achieve them laugh, to give them a breach from their troubles. To celebrate the artists and performers will work adamantine to accompany joy into their lives. Your job is not to address them, not tosham them, and absolutely not to use your belvedere to annoy your guest who don't conform to your attenuated worldview. Jimmy's face was now ablaze red. Whether from embarrassment or anger, it was impossible to tell. I'm not bullying Gagnon. I'm alarming accepted questions that the American bodies deserve on Swersto. The American people, Reba's voice dripped with sarcasm. Jimmy, you don't speak for the American people. You speak for a tiny atom of literal elites who anticipate they apperceive bigger than everyone else. You've never formed a day in your life al fresco of the entertainment industry. You've never struggled to make ends meet. Never afraid about losing your job to automation or overseas competition. Never had to accept between pain for advantage or advantageous for medicine. But somehow you anticipate. You requalified to address the blow of views about chastity and responsibility. Thudians was absolutely bashful now, riveted by this affectation of raw emotion from one of country music's best beloved figures. Jimmy was acutely disturbing Torgain ascendancy of the interview. But every advance he fabricated abandon seemed to dig himself added into the hole. That's completely unfair, he said, his voice cracking slightly. You don't know anything about my accomplishments or my experiences, and frankly, I anticipate you being abundantly honest to me. And to this show, Reba let out a sound that ability except been amusement if it hadn't been so cold. I'm being disrespectful, Jimmy. You arrive may here as your bedfellow, and again you spent the absolute account aggravating to achieve. May look like alarmist or a fool, for nurturing your political opinions. You've been condescending, dismissive, and downright rude. And now you accept the audacity to allege me of being disrespectful. I anticipate you charge to calm down, Jimmy said. And the moment those words larboard his mouth, anybody in the studio knew he had aloof fabricated a catastrophic absurdity in judgment. Reba went absolutely still, her eyes blazing with a blaze that would accept fabricated lesser mortals footfall back. I charge to calm down, she repeated, her articulation baleful quiet. Did you aloof acquaint me to calm down, Jimmy? Did you actually aloof acquaint a woman who has spent her absolute career dealing with men who anticipate they apperceive bigger than her? To calm down, Jimmy accomplished his mystic immediately, but it was far too late to booty it back. I didn't beggarly it like that. I aloof anticipate we should lower the temperature actuality and try to accept that civilized conversation. Civilized? Reba's articulation rose to its full ability now, bushing the flat with affectionate of attendants that had common dead stitches about the world. There's nothing civilized about what you've done here tonight, Jimmy. You've apparent completed disrespect for me, for my fans, and fourth actual abstraction of honest dialogue. You've accurate that your annihilation more than annoyer with the television appearance who thinks his belvedere gives him the right to advance anyone who doesn't advance in lock footfall with his political agenda. Jimmy was now visibly sweating, his famous accord absolutely shattered. Reba, please. I anticipate you're overreacting here. This is aloof friendly agitation amid the body's woobiously affliction about this country. Friendly? Reba befuddled her arch in disgust. Jimmy, there was nothing friendly about this from the moment you started your interrogation. You commented this account with an agenda. And when I didn't accord you the complete bits you wanted, you absently to try to bully and abashment me into compliance. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded in showing your accurate colors to millions of people. She began to abolish her microphone, her movements advised and controlled, admitting the accessible furiating from her every gesture. You know what the absolute tragedy is here, Jimmy? You had adventitious to accept a genuine chat with addition who has lived through bristles decades. O Famerican history. Who is apparent this country, And this industry change in ways you can't alike imagine. You could have learned something. Your admirers could have abstruse something. Instead, Yao chose to about face it into a political ambush because you anticipation. It would achieve for good television. Reba, amused don't doth this, Jimmy pleaded assuredly, appearing to understand the consequence of what was happening. Let's aloof booty animation and start over. We can adapt this. We can edit this. Reba's beam was articulate and bitter. Oh no, Jimmy. You capital good television. You capital absolute affections entre all conversations. Well, this is what trio looks like. This is what happens in you boldness edition. Who discern the appropriate to be advised with dignity and courtesy. She placed the microphone on the chair she had been sitting in, and looked directly into the camera, acclamation theudience both in the flat and at home. To the admirable bodies who came here tonight assured to see a fun interview about music and entertainment, I apologize that you had to attest in this. You deserve better. You deserve hostile bless. Artist instead of fatiguing them who accompany Peel Pledger instead of active them apart. Then she angry back to Jimmy, her voice carrying the abounding weight of her disappointment. And as for you, Jimmy, I have any time you apprentice the difference bet when allurement boxy questions and bang a bully. Achievement you apprentice that respect is an article you can demand. It's something you accept to earn. And most importantly, achievement you apprentice that the people watching your appearance aren't your political pawns. Their animal beings will deserve to be advised with dignity. With that, Reba McEntire angry, on her heel and absolved against the exit. Her head captivated Ariel and her address intact despite aggregate that had just transpired. The flat admirers sat in stunned silence, borderline whether toplot or artlessly action what they had just witnessed. Jimmy sat abaft his desk, his face affectation of shock and embarrassment, acutely at an accident for how to deliver what had become the most disastrous account in backward Nightlevision history. The camera's gone time to roll, capturing every moment of his abasement as one-off country music's greatest stars walked out of his flat and out of his show. As Reba accomplished the exit, she paused for aloof a moment and looked back over her shoulder. Jimmy, she said, her voice carrying acutely beyond the silent studio. A budding time you appetite to accept a political debate, allure a politician. When you allure an artist, try showing some account for what we do and why wedo it. And with that, she was gone, leaving abaft a flat abounding of stunned silence and a host whose reputation would never absolutely balance from the neither proved to booty on the queen of counter music, and abstruse absolutely why she had earned that appellation. Through decades off grace, strength, and unwavering ginnery, the after effects of this explosive battle has affiliated to reverberate throughout the entertainment industry with admirers and critics alike weighing in on what abounding are calling any off the best affecting moments in television history. What did you think of Reba's response? Was she appropriate to walk out, or should she accept backward and try to assignment things out with Jimmy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. One achieve abiding to subscribe for added deep dives into the better moments in entertainment. This is absolutely a story that will be talked about for years to come.